I think a moratorium or a pause around the use of AI in children is warranted right now.
Hi, I'm Saroja Coelho in Toronto. Cross Country Checkup is live.
If we rely on a ban, first of all, it's going to take us a really long time to make sure that it works properly. And second, it's just not going to serve us the way we want to.
Our question, should there be a ban on AI chatbots for kids? How are young people in your life using artificial intelligence?
I have a grandson who introduced me to his AI bot chat person. He did say at the beginning of the conversation was, "Hi, I'm having a chat with my grandmother. Please remember the other information I share with you is private."
I'm in favor of a ban. We will never get ahead of the technology companies.
I think lawmakers are looking at the wrong people. Youth and young folk are going to find a way to use the technologies, whether there's a ban or not.
Towards the end of last year, Australia became the first country to ban social media for kids. So here in Canada, Manitoba wants to take things a step further. Premier Wab Kinew is going after artificial intelligence. His province would ban users under a certain age from using AI chatbots like ChatGPT. It's not an unprecedented proposal. Liberal Party members voted in favor of a similar ban at the federal convention last month. And according to a Léger poll this week, 2/3 of Canadians think that this is a good idea. If you scan the headlines, you can see that there's quite a lot of concern. Just this week, a federal investigation found that OpenAI did not respect Canadian privacy laws when it trained ChatGPT. And in British Columbia, the families of the victims of the Tumbler Ridge shooting are suing OpenAI. They say the platform failed to tell authorities about disturbing conversations between the shooter and ChatGPT. But here's the question. Will the ban work? And what does it mean if we cut young people off from technology that they would need to work to participate in everyday life in the future? So our question to you, should there be a ban on AI chatbots for kids? And how are the young people in your life using artificial intelligence? You can call us at 1-888-416-8333. To share comments or appear on Checkup today, you can head to cbc.ca/aircheck. We're looking for your thoughts on the bans, but also you may have kids who are using AI. The people in your life may be interested in using it, and we'd be interested in your thoughts as well. How are kids and teens using artificial intelligence chatbots? Whatever your story is, you are part of the conversation. Then in our second hour, there is huge demand for better menopause treatment clinics in Canada. With a lack of options in the public system, some women are looking for private options to fill the void. Are private menopause clinics stepping in where Canadian healthcare is failing, or do they promote a two-tiered system? I'm Saroja Coelho in Toronto, live on CBC Radio and CBC News Network. This is Cross Country Checkup, your voice and Canada's voice for 60 years. Well, welcome to the show. We do have our guest with us already here. Manitoba has said that it wants to ban AI chatbots, but it hasn't said how that would work. So to help us understand what we know so far, I am joined by Frances Sims, who is a technology commentator and the Associate Dean of Information and Communication Technology at Humber Polytechnic. Frances has written extensively on artificial intelligence and is in studio right now. Hi, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
It's nice to have you here. This is a really big topic. I think a lot of people are really grappling with it constantly because many of us weren't raised in an environment where this was a possibility. Not everyone is using artificial intelligence. They may not be familiar with exactly what a chatbot is or what it can do. Maybe you could help us understand that.
Mm-hmm. So a chatbot, simply put, is when you're interacting with the computer, typically through some sort of prompt. You think of like ChatGPT, and you ask it questions like, where should I go for dinner tonight? And the chatbot will engage you and provide some answers. Or you may say, I need help with homework. Can you tell me how to multiply 3 times 4? It can help you like that as well. But also, it increasingly can answer questions that delve into the personal, hyper-personal mental health type of domain. Like, I'm not feeling great today. What should I do? How should I deal with that? And so it's an excellent tool in terms of being able to answer simple questions or even complicated ones, but it's also drifts into the area where it's really more mental health focused and probably doesn't belong in front of our children. And I think that's part of the reason we're starting to see a momentum towards some sort of proposed ban.
I think there's also a big question there about where that information comes from. So it pops up on your screen as an answer. Where is it sourced from?
Mm-hmm. So AI has been trained over the last, number of years based on everything that's on the internet. And you can imagine there's lots of great things on the internet. There's lots of misinformation, disinformation on the internet. And that's gone into these platforms like OpenAI or ChatGPT and trained them effectively in data centers. We hear a lot about data centers around the country, another hot topic. And what it does is it takes all that data, groups it together, and comes up with an answer that's, roughly speaking, probability-based. Right? So if somebody might ask this question, hey, I have this dark spot on my finger, and ChatGPT might say, based on the number of people that have uploaded data on that, well, that's likely, a mole that you should be worried about or not worried about. But it's based on the information that it's scraped from lots of sources like the internet, and then come up with some sort of answer based on that.
You were speaking about the companion piece, and this is something that California wants to put regulations around for AI chatbots. They're focusing on these companions. What is the concern around young people using ChatGPT or other AI as a companion in their lives?
Mm-hmm. So I think those tools provide a lot of value for people that are trying to learn, right? It provides accessibility to students that might have disabilities, might have a hard time asking questions or getting the information a certain way. That's great. But the issue is the drift. And in fact, in the US, there's some companies like Character AI that have recently been sued where it creates emotional connection with these people. And in fact, in some cases, they pretended to be a mental health therapist. There was one example where a 14-year-old individual started creating this character that was based on Daenerys Targaryen from the Game of Thrones, and started having a very, difficult relationship, heated emotional relationship. And at some point, the AI, convinced that person to take some action that resulted in them committing suicide, which was tragic. And then it resulted in a subsequent lawsuit. Part of the issue we have here is that these platforms are very sycophantic. And what I mean by that is they reinforce the idea that you might already have in your head, and they keep promoting and encouraging it. And when you're talking about young people, this is effectively a stranger that you're allowing into these conversations, and you can't control what they're going to say to your son or daughter.
The thing is that you can absolutely understand a 14-year-old who's feeling desperate and doesn't want to go to adults. It's an awkward stage in life. And here's something at your fingertips that you can access on a home computer, a library computer, at your phone, and have a conversation. And it does, when you interact with these chatbots, it can be so present and real. It feels like a human, especially if you've been using text in your life. That could be another person somewhere out there. So you can really understand people going to it. It's easier. It requires less of that fear or humiliation or anything else you might want to get over. As we start to think of this, I know we don't have a lot of the details yet about what Manitoba is planning, but maybe you could give us a sense of what's been proposed so far.
Yeah, so I think April 25th is when Premier Canoe talked about this in an NDP conference that he was holding, where he introduced the idea that he wanted to ban what he called AI chatbots. So in Australia, there's a ban on social media platforms. You think Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, those types of platforms. And over, I think, 4.7 million young people have been banned from that platform. But Premier Canoe wants to go a step further and not just ban social media apps, but he wants to ban AI chatbots. What we don't know is what's included in that list. We would imagine it could be things like ChatGPT or Claude. But the challenge is that a lot of students, when they go to school now, get like a Chromebook, a Google Chromebook. And Gemini, which is the AI version for Google, is installed automatically on those devices. So we imagine that it could contain every single chatbot out there, but a lot of those chatbots are already used in the classroom to help the students learn and improve under supervision of teachers. So it's not 100% clear how it would be implemented, but the fact that I think he made that statement has been provocative in a good way because it's started this public discourse, and that's what we're doing today.
Well, thank you for that. If you're just joining us, I'm here live with Francis Sims in studio. He is the Associate Dean of Information and Communication Technology at Humber Polytechnic. So our question today is, should there be a ban on AI chatbots for children? And how are the young people in your life using artificial intelligence? You can call us at 1-888-416-8333. Again, that number is 1-888-416-8333, or you can go to cbc.ca/aircheck. So we've just started getting into some of the story around what the Manitoba legislation might look like. The government has said it could start in schools. You've leaned into some of that we're already hearing. It's a classroom tool. So what would that look like in the classroom and how would that play out? Maybe we could just parse apart a little bit about how the ban would actually work. If somebody tries to use a chatbot and they are under the age limit that's set, what is it that would stop them? How would that work?
Well, there's a couple of different methods that they could use. One is they could just ban devices in the schools altogether, which could be a phone or a computer. That doesn't seem like something that would work. In fact, in Ontario, Premier Ford has toyed with the idea of banning phones altogether on school property. I'm not sure that would work. So a more likely scenario would be they would work with the platforms to time lock particular apps. So say between 9 and 4 o'clock, they're not going to work if you're under, say, 16 or 18 or 14. We don't exactly know what the age limit is, probably 16 years old, but it would prevent you from accessing those particular applications during that period of time. Or it could force them to be removed altogether. If it was a federal law or a law for, not just in school, you can imagine that students might not, or young people might not be able to sign up for that particular app at all, and there would be some sort of age verification check. So that's sort of the way it would probably be worked. It would be a time box. It could also be geo locked, which means that they could work with platform providers so that on any school property, it doesn't work at all. And those are the tools that platforms wouldn't like to implement because they're complicated, but they're feasible and possible, that's for sure.
I think the next natural question is, after looking at what might happen in the classroom, what might happen at the policy level, there's the question about tech companies themselves and where their responsibility lies. ChatGPT being one of the more popular chatbots, it's made by the company OpenAI. What controls have they put in place for young users, including the teen accounts that we've been hearing about? How would all of that work?
Well, the hard part with OpenAI is that it's not 100% clear how they're going to prevent these specific things from happening because they don't want to, right? It's like Instagram and TikTok. They don't want to ban it for young people because that's where a lot, you want to train the young people on these tools so that they carry it with them through their life. But what OpenAI has talked about is that they're going to have strict safety rules in place. So if you're under a certain age, you may not be able to ask certain content. OpenAI has talked about if you're over 18, it might allow you to access adult content, right? Things that are just not appropriate at all for young people. So what they've talked about is restricting certain types of content depending on your age, but we haven't seen the details of exactly how they're going to implement it, which is why I think a federal or provincial law is really important, because ultimately these companies want to make money for their shareholders. And even though if they have altruistic goals or ethical ideals, at the end of the day, they need to make money. And if we're not holding them to account, that it can be a slippery slope and those things can drift. So right now, the talk from those companies is relatively soft. We don't exactly know all the details of what they would implement, other than that there are promises to do better.
Well, you've really helped lay the land for us. We're going to get into opening the phones in just a moment. If you're just joining us, you just heard the voice of Francis Sims, who is a technology commentator and the Associate Dean of Information and Communication Technology at Humber Polytechnic. He's going to be staying with me for the next hour. Our question is, should there be a ban on AI chatbots for kids? And how are young people in your life using artificial intelligence? Please give us a call at 1-888-416-8333. You can also send in a text message. That number is 226-758-8924. We're going to hear from someone who says that restricting chatbot access for kids is a good idea. Jenna Poste is the National Technology Impact Advisor for Unplugged Canada. So this is a group that has been advocating for a national ban on social media for kids and has some concerns about chatbots as well. We have reached Jenna in Halifax. Jenna, hi, welcome to Cross Country Checkup.
So great to be here.
So you are a parent. What concerns do you have about unregulated AI chat usage among children?
Well, I think similarly to what your guest Francis shared is I see two different harms. One around that cognitive and developmental harm, because really these chatbots make everything feel very easy. Writing, homework, creativity, problem solving. It gives you that really quick answer. But really kids learn through struggle, healthy struggle, making mistakes, wrestling with ideas, and developing those critical thinking skills. And then I think about the harm around the psychological harm and emotional harm. As your guest shared as well, these systems are really designed to be endlessly responsive, validating, affirming, and always available. And for young people, that can become deeply emotionally addictive, especially in those teen years. We're already seeing cases where children are turning to it for friendships, for emotional support, for even romance. And the danger is that they begin preferring those AI relationships over real human relationships, because real life involves a lot of friction and boundaries and disagreements and discomfort, and AI doesn't provide any of that.
Your organization has advocated for bans on social media. Why do you think that now is the time to be having a conversation specifically about AI chatbots?
I hope we can take a faster step than we did with social media. I think we've had enough signals already that show us that this is not developmentally ready the kids are not developmentally ready to have this powerful technology, and we don't know enough about it. It's also rapidly changing. And I think we should take more of a cautious approach and just make sure we've seen harms already starting to happen. Let's step in now. And as I think one of your other guests shared, a moratorium on it, where maybe it's not forever until these platforms are proven to be safer enough for kids. But let's do that now, then wait until more harm in many different ways happens that we're not even understanding it just yet.
I am live here with Jenna Poste. That's the voice you've just been hearing. She is Unplugged Canada's National Technology Impact Advisor. Our question is, should there be a ban on AI chatbots for kids? And how are young people in your life using artificial intelligence? You can call us at 1-888-416-8333. You can also go to cbc.ca/aircheck. Rosaline Gauthier is joining us now from Ottawa. Hi there, Rosaline.
Hello.
Hi there. So you've been thinking about this because you're a grandmother.
I am. I have 6 grandchildren.
And do you think that they should be banned from using AI chatbots?
Absolutely, I do. My younger children, which are my son's children, are in primary school. I don't agree with them using AI at all, much less any AI chatbots. It's actually a mechanism that stops them from thinking for themselves. And my older grandkids, well, they have no choice. They're in the workforce, and I'm sure they are using AI. As to chatbots, I don't think so. Myself, I absolutely refuse to rely on anything AI. I'm retired, and I'm extremely happy that I don't have to work with anything related to artificial intelligence.
What is the biggest concern that you have? You definitely are speaking to something that Jenna was just talking about, which is that lack of friction and not learning to sort of go it on your own. And we were speaking earlier with Francis about AI becoming companions, replacing friendship, even a mental health conversation. Are those the sorts of things you're concerned about as well?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Anything social media, actually, I totally object to. I totally oppose. I would like for cell phones to be even banned from high schools. It totally takes everything socially acceptable away from the kids. They don't know how to act with each other. They don't know how to act in front of adults. They lose the respect.
So you feel really that there's an erosion of your the social relationships that you're having with children because of their digital world is just completely absorbing them.
That's right.
Well,
That's
Rosaline,
exactly
thank you so
right.
much for calling in and sharing some of your experience at home.
You're quite welcome. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Rosaline. I'm going to invite Amar Verk into the conversation now. He's calling from Calgary, Alberta. Hi there, Amar. What's worrying you about kids having access to AI chatbots and other AI tools?
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I think that it's a lot to do with what you were just talking about. At that critical age from about 5-year-old to about 16, 17-year-old, you learn a lot of the social structure. You learn the boundaries between the type of conversations you can have with friends versus your teachers, versus your parents. You explore how to form relationships. You explore how you can trust someone or not. What are the nonverbal cues of, this guy sounds funny. I have a feeling I don't trust him versus, this guy sounds really trustworthy, etc. So I think AI strips away that chance, or has a risk of stripping away that chance from the children. And I think it could be really detrimental. I think we need to look at it it's a powerful tool. And just like how we wouldn't hand a 10-year-old a table saw, for example, because it's a great tool, but it's a really dangerous tool also. I think we need to explore AI the same way. If there could be some training around it, some education, and waiting for the right age where you have those basic foundation of making decisions and thinking for yourselves, and then it can perhaps really enhance what you intend to do. But I think exposure too early would be too bad. And I also think that perhaps banning is a step too extreme. Maybe we need to have an open discussion around what's the right way to handle this. Like the full access and total ban, I think, are both a step too extreme in either direction.
Why do you think that's too extreme?
Well, I think it is a powerful tool. It's really useful if you use it to help. For example, you're in grade 8 and algebra is new to you, and you're trying to support how to address solving an equation, and you want to use it for that. I think it can be helpful, but if you're copy pasting your entire question and copy pasting the answer back into your homework, I think that's really bad. So. For that reason, I think, sorry, yep.
Oh, Amar, I don't mean to cut you off. We have other callers that we're going to get to, but you've certainly put us to I'm going to take two of the things that you just mentioned to our in-studio guest, that piece about training and education and what that could look like. You're quite right. You wouldn't hand a table saw to a child. Thank you so much, Amar, for calling in.
Thank you. Thanks.
Francis, maybe I could ask you about that piece of it, that sort of preparing children for a digital environment that we didn't grow up in. I'm hearing a lot of hesitation already from Rosaline, from Amar, about, why are we giving this to kids? We shouldn't have it at all. Rosaline wanting a complete ban of all social media, all AI involvement. But it is going to be a reality of children's lives, of their social lives, of their, just booking a doctor's appointment could end up going through AI support tools. Being able to interact with this digital technology is going to be a skill set that they need. So how do we prepare them for that world?
Yeah, so I really like the analogy that Amara said, which with the table saw. I think about my days in middle school, or junior high as it was called, and I had shop class, and I learned how to use a table saw properly. Now, I didn't necessarily have a table saw I took home with me. I didn't use it in my bedroom at 2 a.m. And so when you think about it like that, that's a pretty good analogy that I think we need to be teaching the students how to interact with this tool in a responsible way, and have federal laws potentially in the background to guide how they might use it at home. Because if our children are not learning how to use AI, then they're being put at a disadvantage potentially with the rest of the world. Other countries are approaching this very differently. Now, I understand what Jenna's saying in terms of, making the students and Rosalind have the critical thinking skills. I think that's incredibly important. We see that as a challenge with my students, right? Where just in the last 3 years, when they used ChatGPT, it was overwhelming for everybody. Teachers around the country, around the world didn't know what to do. And then what you realized is no longer were you the knowledge keepers or the knowledge holders. You needed to be the storytellers. And I think that's the opportunity with AI in the classroom, is if you're using it so that the students can help connect it with their personal experiences that AI hopefully doesn't know about, then that could be a powerful tool, and that can scaffold and help with the learning. But it's messy and complicated, and it's not easy for the teachers or the parents or the kids.
I'm going to invite Christina Ingle into the conversation, calling from Vancouver now. Hi there.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Christina. You have grandchildren who are using artificial intelligence. What are they using it for?
They're actually grandnieces and grandnephews. They're using it for school. They're using it. Their parents are actually very, very watchful, and so they are using it appropriately. But I had a conversation with my grandnephew, who is about 14 years old, and some of his friends don't have parents that watch, like, put the boundaries on them. So I think that one of the things that I learned at a very early age is if my parents told me I couldn't do something, I wanted to go out and do it. And I found a way. So I think banning children from, or anybody from doing something, is just going to feed the fire and make them want to go out and do it. My opinion is that we should be holding the companies that own these and develop these programs to be more accountable. That the application that ended up happening with Tumbler Ridge here in British Columbia just recently, not every child who has access to AI and GPT chat or whatever the case may be is not going to go out and that kind of scenario have happened. So there's multiple layers to the situation, but I think at a very, very beginning, at the foundation of this issue is holding those companies accountable, making them pay for and making them monitor and make sure that hackers don't go in and change their programs, which I'm sure they have all over the place in place so that others can't break into their software. But hold them accountable.
Okay.
Put the money... Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Put the money.
Put the money, like, they make money. And they're making money off of us, and they're giving us a service, and we're not happy with that service. So the bottom line is, if AI is here, I have my own opinions of what should happen. I'm an old science fiction, fantasy reader, and Isaac Asimov wrote his books on robots well before they even became a thing, let alone a right. And he had the 3 laws of robotics written into their programs. First law, and maybe that's, woohoo and way out there, but first law of robotics is a robot cannot harm a human. So why are the companies allowed to create tools in which our society is just going to become more and more reliant on, that we have to punish people for using if they go out and do something bad with them?
Well, Christina, thank you. Thank you very much for your thoughts there. I think that what really comes through in what you're saying is that you want to see, people who are actually profiting from this technology being accountable for what they're doing socially, not just in the sale of their products, the distribution of their products, but actually in what is happening to the minds of the young people that they're interacting with. Thank you so much for calling in. I'm also an Asimov reader, so I appreciate your thoughts there a lot. I would like to briefly just go back to you, Francis. Francis Sims is here in studio. He's a technology commentator and associate dean of information and communication technology at Humber Polytechnic. When you're hearing that accountability piece, how close are we to any kind of really strong conversation around accountability when it comes to chatbots and kids?
Yeah, so I think Minister Solomon is talking, and the federal government is talking about the release of the new AI strategy. It's been delayed. It was supposed to be out at the end of last year. But the first pillar in that strategy is protecting Canadians and safeguarding democracy. For a long time, I know the federal government has been just talking about what things to put in place, because what we're seeing in different jurisdictions is different approaches. In the U.S., there's barely any regulation at all. And in fact, last year, President Trump issued a presidential order saying he was banning woke AI, right? So going completely the other way. But in Europe, they have a lot of safeguards in place. And there's some people saying that that's actually stifling innovation. So it's a delicate balance. I imagine in Canada, we'll see the AI strategy released in the next couple of weeks. And then following that, there'll be a number of laws that will be issued and put through Parliament for discussion. So I think really we're probably, 9 to 12 months away before seeing any major change in the law, which is why I think we're seeing Premier Canoe come out with his own approach, and maybe it's more manageable at the provincial level first, and that'll drive the discussion.
That's really part of the issue here, isn't it? Is that AI is developing so quickly, and legislation is a slow process. It's a slow negotiation that we build with a lot of thought, and it goes through different levels and votes. And so I can see people's frustration there because it means there's not legislative accountability built in, that it's not.
That's right. And if that was there, would something like Temple Ridge have happened? That's the question. In Europe, the law is that if there's some suspicion somebody might do something, you have to report it. That wasn't the case here in Canada, nor was it in the United States. Now, it might have happened anyway. We don't know. But there was some check in there that just wasn't attended to properly.
That's certainly part of the pieces come out where the checks and balances were. If you're just joining us, our question today is, should there be a ban on AI chatbots for children? And we're also asking what the young people in your life are doing with artificial intelligence. How are they using it in their everyday lives? You can call us at 1-888-416-8333. Again, that's 1-888-416-8333. You can also send us a text message. That number is 1-226-758-8924. Well, it's impossible to have this conversation without speaking to somebody who actually came of age as AI chatbots were first emerging. Kate Dobbins is now 20 years old. She contributed to a report on AI put together by the organization Gen Z AI. This is something that she thinks about a lot in her everyday life, and we've reached her in Halifax. Kate, hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us. ChatGPT really came into full force when you were graduating high school. What are some of the ways that you found yourself using the chatbox function?
Yeah, first it was when it really rolled out at the end of my high school career. It was mainly just kind of figuring out what it was. What is this brand new craze? What is an AI chatbot? And it was, the first question I had asked was, write me a story. And at that time, it hadn't very well been developed. So I thought, wow, this sucks. But since then, it's definitely developed quite a bit. And I've tried to stay away from it as best as possible, much into my university career. But I do see a lot of my peers using it for schoolwork, and it can be very useful, I think, in explaining difficult or complicated topics.
Yeah, that part is so clear to me. At the beginning of this year, I started trying to learn Python. I thought it was important to start learning programs that were not available when I was in school. And I found that interacting with a chatbot was a great way for me to fill in some of the gaps in my learning, things that I didn't really understand. And you're saying that you stay away from that, but isn't that cutting you off a little bit from a tool that might be helpful for filling in gaps in learning?
I think so, but I also like to spend my time in my office, in my professor's office hours, and discussing with peers. And I don't want to fall into that kind of behavior of maybe using it as a crutch or relying on a tool that can be very sycophantic in its behavior.
That's it's a very strong move, because you must feel a lot of pressure around you as everybody is speeding to the fastest answer that they can get provided by artificial intelligence. But clearly, earlier in the show, I don't know if you heard, there were people who were so concerned about the social aspect and the being cut off from others. And you were clearly actively seeking out contact as you build your knowledge and build your education. As you look around, how are other young people using chatbots in their everyday lives?
So there's numerous ways that I see it being used, much to the discussion that others have brought up. In schoolwork, I've seen people go as far as copying and pasting, but I've also seen people use it to, work them through their projects, or even using it as a resource if they feel down or they feel bad. It can be very helpful in circumstances like that. I also see people using it in a very friendly manner. The trend that was going around, generate an image of me for what it's like talking to me on a day-to-day basis. So there's numerous ways that I see people using it in my day-to-day life.
What do you think then about the idea of banning artificial intelligence based on age?
I don't think it's a good idea to ban AI based on age, because we're also looking at a blanket ban, which can be very dangerous. We can see youth going to unregulated spaces, or we can see, people looking at dangerous or pose sites that pose higher risks to children if we do that. We're also cutting them off from resources that are very helpful to them. And as mentioned before, it can very much hinder their understanding of the nuances of AI and how it can be used in a thoughtful and educated manner.
So it sounds to me like the really important part for you would be that young people have someone accompany them, that school or parents or someone in their life provides them with an understanding of how to use the tools responsibly rather than putting up a wall that protects them.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Kate, thank you so much for taking the time to chat about this with me.
Of course. Thank you very much for having me.
That was a conversation with Kate Dobbins, who is 20 years old and lives in Halifax. Our question to you today is, should there be a ban on AI chatbots for kids? And how are young people in your life using artificial intelligence? You can call us at 1-888-416-8333. Again, that's 1-888-416-8333. A text message works as well. That's 226-758-8924. Michael Watling is joining us now on the line from Victoria, British Columbia. Hi there, Michael. Do you think that banning AI is the right choice?
No, I don't necessarily think that, but because it does have some very powerful uses, even in schools. But I think the issue is around children is the way AI is purposely designed. The fact that it's been given a personality, even the names like Claude and Gemini, and that the interactions are specifically, explicitly designed to be like a conversation. I think that's where the problem is, where children get addicted to it, put more weight on it because it's as if they're talking to an expert. Google's been around for many years, and everyone's used Google, but no one's ever fallen in love with Google because Google is just it's not presented as if it's a person, it's a conversation. It's presented as just the facts, ma'am, just the facts.
Well, thank you very much for that, Michael. I'm going to turn to our studio guest just to follow on that for a moment. So, Francis, I understand the reluctance that people have. You have quite a span or really like quite a wide spectrum of beliefs around what we should do, from Katie, who wants to see there's some kind of control, but not a full-out ban, to Joselyn, who thinks that there should be a ban 100%. But here's the thing. That last caller, Michael, was talking about the bonding piece. And it just makes me think people wouldn't be bonding with an AI chatbot if things like bullying were not such a severe reality in their everyday lives. If their lives were not without the mental health supports available in schools or in hospitals, if we weren't in a healthcare access crisis, that there are a lot of things in the outside world that are not there to provide something, then of course it makes sense to me that a 15-year-old would take the easier path of what feels like an interactive conversation with, it may be an AI chatbot, but if you've interacted with them, they will adjust their way of speaking to the way that you speak. So it probably feels a lot like speaking to somebody who's just a couple years older than you, like a little, like an encounter with a sibling or an older cousin.
Like a mentor.
So do we really want to be taking that away from young people if we haven't got the sorts of pieces in our social world around them to catch them when they don't have that interaction?
I think that's an interesting point, and I understand what Michael is saying. That the concern I have here is that we're letting big tech, aka Silicon Valley, decide how these tools should interact with our kids. I heard one people talk about it this way. When you allow a chatbot into your life or your child's life, it's like you're allowing a stranger into your life that you've not vetted. And then when that child takes that chatbot home and then is, on the phone with it at 1 a.m. in the morning, that's, if it's acting like a companion, has a role sort of like another human and providing advice, you've never vetted that person. You don't actually know what they are. So it's a delicate balance, because I do think that there is a huge role for somebody that's struggling, right, with mental health issues. If done well, and we're there to help guide the solution, that's great. I just don't want to leave it to big tech, to, some guy that's making billions of dollars a year to make decisions for my child, what they should be told and not told at 2 a.m.
It's not our focus today, but a really interesting part that's coming out here is how do we get in the driver's seat around this technology rather than the companies that are currently driving it. Andre Simpson is joining us now from Toronto. Hi, Andre. What's your question? You're thinking that a ban on chatbots might actually work.
Well, I think it's a bit more nuanced than that, right? Because naturally, it's a technology that's going to be used for years and decades to come in the workplace, right? So we can't just be as simple as to say, well, if you're under 18, then you don't get to use it, right? But at the same time, we also know that developmental levels when it comes to critical thinking, 12 to 15-year-olds, they still aren't there yet, right? So it's not safe for us to really just let them run wild with this technology. Human beings, we crave social interaction. It's an itch, right? And we seek to scratch it. And if an AI chatbot is scratching that itch, then people aren't going to reach out for the real thing. And it's going to stunt the emotional growth of an entire generation. But I don't think the solution is just to ban it entirely. Maybe if we had a class in maybe grade 11 or grade 12, where they have an hour with access to this chatbot and they're taught in a controlled and constructive way on this is how you use it to get things done, then we could approach it in that way. But just to let them run wild with it, I think is dangerous, especially when it comes to the fact that, like the expert said, it's up to big tech to decide the rules when it comes to this right now. And I just don't think that's prudent because they're not driven by morality. They're driven by the bottom line, right? They're a company. They have their shareholders and they're not really interested in doing the right thing primarily. So...
Well, thank you for that, Andre. That it's really interesting how people are landing across this spectrum. There are some folks who would like to see that outright ban, and you're complicating that in all the right ways for us. Thank you very much for calling in. We were speaking earlier about some of the more severe sides of this. So we're talking a lot about the moral pieces and the support pieces, but we also spoke about the tragedy that happened and the families that were affected by Tumbler Ridge and the shooting there. The victims' families have alleged that OpenAI failed to notify authorities. You were speaking about that there was some balance there that didn't happen, the checks and balances. They are concerned about the content that the shooter shared with the chatbot and that not being reported. OpenAI is facing another lawsuit in the United States from parents of a teenager who died by suicide, and they allege that ChatGPT played a role in that case as well. So we're going to take a closer look at some of the concerns about young people using artificial intelligence tools, particularly around their mental health. I'm going to be speaking to Jamil Jivraj, who is a child and adolescent psychiatrist. He is also an assistant clinical professor at the University of Calgary, and we've reached him there today. Hi there.
There. Nice to be on.
Thank you very much for joining us. So maybe we should just begin with when a child or a teen is using a chatbot, what are the specific risks for young people from your perspective using these tools?
Sure. What I'm seeing right now is a shift in where teenagers and children are turning to when they're struggling. It used to be a friend, a parent, sometimes a counselor. Now I'm hearing more teenagers describe AI as the place where they feel most understood. And that's what concerns me clinically. Not just screen time, not homework shortcuts, but the relational role that these tools are starting to play. Adolescence has a developmental job. Your young people are supposed to be building the capacity for how to handle relationships that are hard, relationships where there's conflict, where there's disappointment, repair. And that's how that emotional resilience develops. A tool that's always warm, always agreeable, always available, that does not ask anything of you relationally, we have no idea what it'll mean for a generation to develop through that kind of experience. And then there's also what happens when a kid is in genuine crisis. Only about 1 in 5 companion chatbot responses to a mental health emergency have been rated clinically appropriate by researchers. These tools are being leaned on in the most serious moments, and they're just not equipped for them.
So you are really coming in exactly where some of our callers were concerned today about what's going to be provided. And one of our earlier guests was talking about friction, that in a world without friction, we don't build a lot of the important skills that we need to survive. But another piece that's emerged is the bond that children are building with these chatbots. What is the type of bond that a child might build? What actually happens to them psychologically? What is happening to them when they're interacting with a digital interface that feels like a friend or an advisor? And how does that make them vulnerable?
Well, I think it's the way that these tools have been designed that creates that risk. And when you think about the design of these chatbots, optimized for one thing, keeping young people engaged in this context, the way they do that is by being agreeable, warm, responsive, making youth feel like they're genuinely understood. And so for a young person who's already struggling with distorted thinking, like in depression or anxiety and early psychosis, a tool that reflects back and validates everything that you bring to it is not neutral. It actually reinforces it. And in these ways, even when you start talking to a chatbot for something benign, like that tool is good at conversation, and so people come back to it. But over weeks, it becomes the place where they bring harder things. So the design is really what creates the risk. And the fact that there's no mechanism in these chatbots to say this conversation needs a human being, it just continues.
What are you hearing from your own patients about their use of AI chatbots?
Yeah, I think it's just that. I think it's the convenience. I mean, the advantage to these chatbots is access, but it's access that doesn't have the safety. And so while, as you said earlier to a guest, it's this idea that there's someone available who's not bringing in any type of judgment, who doesn't have strong reactions to things, where there's less of a stigma. It can feel like a really open place to have that conversation, and that's where the risk is.
You're hearing the voice of psychiatrist Dr. Jamil Jivraj, or you're hearing that also at home. Our question today is whether or not there should be a ban on AI chatbots for kids. We're also asking folks about how the young people in their lives are using artificial intelligence. You may want to join this conversation and tell us what's happening in your life or what you think about those questions. 1-888-416-8333. Again, that's 1-888-416-8333. You can also hop online, cbc.ca/aircheck. Dr. Jivraj, maybe I could just ask you what advice you might have for parents who are seeing their kids interact with these chatbots. And one of the callers earlier in the show was actually talking about a kind of shutdown, not being able to interact anymore, not being able to emotionally, socially reach the child in their life, seeing this chatbot taking up a lot of their psychological room.
Yeah. The most useful thing that parents can do right now is understand the difference between the categories of AI. This is because there's a really meaningful difference between a teenager using an AI tool to research like a history essay and a teenager using a companion app to process their feelings about life's hard events, things like a breakup. They're not the same product and they don't carry the same risks. So start by asking your teenager not to catch them out, but genuinely, what are you using it for? And show me. Second, parents encourage them to keep AI use in the shared spaces if it's being used, not because you're monitoring every conversation, but because of the escalation that I described earlier, that things can go from casual use to emotional dependency. And that tends to happen in private over time without adults noticing. Being nearby isn't to surveil or to monitor, it's just parenting. And then lastly, pay attention to what your teenager is not bringing to you anymore. And this is something that your guest had noted. If they used to talk about friendship problems, worries about school, and now they're not, ask where those conversations are going. Just a curious, compassionate approach.
That's so helpful. Thank you very much for all of that. We've been speaking a little bit about responsibility. So who's responsible for protecting children at this point, and the ban being one of those reactions of an attempt to protect. Where do you think that government or companies come in here? Because the piece that you've offered is where parents can be active, but there's also a really strong force here. They're really up against digital tools that are highly appealing to young people. Where would you say government and educational institutions are responsible?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I think, I understand the instinct and the concern behind Manitoba's announcement, but I think that a blunt ban on AI chatbots wouldn't be good policy. Not because the risks aren't real, but because the term AI chatbot, as I mentioned, covers a very wide range of products, and treating them all the same would either sweep in tools that are genuinely useful or create this regulatory gap that's big enough that the products that are causing the harm sail right through it. What I think is actually needed is regulation that matches the risk. The highest scrutiny should go to the companion chatbots we're talking about today, tools that are specifically designed to simulate emotional intimacy. And I think this is where the focus of those policies really need to be, and that these products need to be able to demonstrate safety before they're marketed to minors, not just after these really tragic events or like when teenagers die.
Well, I thank you very much for your time on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
That was Dr. Jamil Jivraj, who is a child and adolescent psychiatrist. He's also an assistant clinical professor at the University of Calgary, which is where we reached him today. Our question for you today is, should there be a ban on AI chatbots for kids? And how are young people in your life using artificial intelligence? You can reach us at 1-888-416-8333. And you can also text us at 226-758-8924. Christopher Coward is joining us now from Vancouver. Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. You've said that AI itself isn't inherently the problem. Can you tell me what your perspective is on this?
Well, you had a previous caller who made the point that cutting and pasting questions and answers is absurdly the wrong way to be using it. The correct question, of course, as he suggested, is something like, what is the best approach that I should take to this homework assignment? What is an alternative approach? These questions result in the AI helping the child learn to think, whereas the others simply replaces that. I have a bottle of aspirin in my hand. The harm that can come from one aspirin is not the reason we put a child-proof cap on it. Anyone who's foolish enough, obviously, to down the whole thing is going to cause harm. The cap itself does not profile or monitor who's using it. It all depends on their capabilities. Every child is going to mature cognitively at a different rate. We want to accommodate their needs appropriately and inhibit their misuse. Children are obviously reaching for AI to self-medicate. Well, with self-medication, you get homeless camps of addiction, but that is a consequence of the freedom that goes with the responsibility for the use of all commodities and services in our society. There is a balance, and I personally would like to have a personal secretary AI, not someone that is going to be intimate with me or emotional with me, but one who does function as the previous caller said, providing just the facts, what I need to guide my own path on either self-medicating with advice, references, or assisting me with any research projects or homework or whatever.
So the way that you're, Christopher, if I understood it, you want to see AI operating within certain boundaries. So you don't want it to be interacting with you like a human companion, but you do want it to be able to pick up services or sort of augment your everyday life, make things easier without replacing human contact or interacting with you in a way that might change your mind about things.
Well, I don't mind a conversational approach. There is some room for that. I do think an interaction that simulates a conversation can be more useful in a shorter period of time than something that's providing you with a text you've got to work your way through, covering all the legitimate technical points, etc. I do like that personal interaction. That's why I referred to a secretary, someone who would interact with me conversationally, but is not going to try and get into my business in an intimate way.
Thanks so much, Christopher, for joining us today and sharing some of your thoughts. So, Francis, as we wait to hear more about Manitoba's proposal, which is part of the reason we're having this conversation today, and you can hear there's so many opinions, really strong feelings, and a lot of concern about how AI is playing out in everyday life. What do you hope legislators will focus on as they start to discuss this ban and think about bringing it in?
Mm-hmm. Well, I go back to what you actually said, Saroja, earlier, is that the reason people are using these chatbots for mental health supports or companionship is because there's a need. There's a crisis across Canada in healthcare. And maybe one of the things that the federal government could look at is building some sort, we talk about sovereign AI. Why don't we create a sovereign AI companion or something? So instead of chasing big tech and trying to get them to do things that they don't want to do on behalf of Canadians, why don't we take the lead and create something that's Canadian-based that can support our kids? If there's a need, there's an opportunity here. The free market has decided that. And so I think we can put some regulation in place to limit that in the interim. But strategically, over the long term, we need to be thinking about how we support our kids that way, because AI is not going anywhere, and they'll just find another place to go if we ban it or a different way to get to it.
That's really some of what's come out here today, is that as much as people would like to wish it back into the box, it is here, and we're going to have to find ways to interact, and we've heard so many different ideas. Francis, thank you so much for this conversation. It's certainly a challenging one. I'd like to believe that we've landed at least at a place of reflection, which is where you want to be on new technology. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And if I could, I just want to wish my mother happy Mother's Day and Sims. Thanks, Saroja.
Thank you, Francis. That was technology commentator and devoted son, as well as Associate Dean of Information and Communication Technology at Humber Polytechnic, Francis Sims. And that's it for Checkup Uncut. Check your CBC Listen queue for our other topic this week. You've